So now I want to recommend to you a book on the spiritual path, which is with the German title Wege zum Selbst by Ken Wilber, but the English original title is No Boundary. It is quite an old book. He has written so many books, but I think this is from the 80s. And so this is 79, even a little bit older. The German translation is from 84. I think this is a very good book if you are relatively new to spirituality, because it gives a good framework to understand spiritual practices and the different approaches. And it goes even beyond, a little bit beyond the spiritual practices, into psychology, and why that is also important and can be an important step towards transcending self. And so his approach is framework, even though you might argue with it if it's true or not, it's always only a theory, of course, but it's a helpful framework. And to see that you can, or you have to develop first a little bit on the personality level to get to spirituality, where you then finally transcend the self, can be really helpful. And it was for me, because I was overly, or am maybe still overly, focusing on this spiritual development and gaining insight and so far into the nature of reality. But really having a good foundation in life is important too, because we have this physical body that is our vehicle, so to speak, to develop spiritually. And so this physical body and this vehicle is supported by what we do, our work, our environment, our relationships. So it's also important to have a solid foundation in that area. And so his approach is basically I think 3 or 4 part approach, where you first you work on integrating the shadow into your persona, which means we all have aspects of our self-identity which we deny. We think, okay, these bad qualities, they might apply to other people, but certainly not to us. And while it's true that everyone has qualities to a different degree, or exhibits or exerts these qualities to a different degree, it's also true that to some degree we all have them. Because whatever you are able to see in other people, you actually have to have yourself. You have to have some of these aspects yourself to understand even what it means for another person to be evil. You have to know on a very intimate level in yourself what it means to be evil. We all have this understanding, and usually it's borrowed in some of the more subconscious areas of our mind. And so the first thing is to really explore these areas of our persona that we think we are not, and then become aware that we are them. And it's okay to have them, even though we might think about them, and we might think evil thoughts, for example, and they might come up. Then we don't have to act on them, and it doesn't hurt us to accept those things, and it doesn't turn us into an evil person. Many people think that way. Then when they accept these dirty or evil thoughts, then, oh my God, then maybe I will turn evil. And no, that's not the case. Even it's much more, it's the opposite, because if you accept the negative aspects and the more borrowed shadows of your persona, they won't have the tendency to once unconscious or erupt from the unconscious and make you act out of desperation, because all of these aspects really have never been given the attention they needed. So it's always better to take those things and get them into your conscious awareness. And then this is the first step he describes in his framework for overall spirituality. And then the second step is to integrate the body back into our self, into what we think we are. which means on a practical level we always think we are something in the mind that has a body, that just uses the body to move around in the world and interact with it, but we don't really feel that we are our hand that we are our hand, or we are our legs and the body and everything. So if you see where this is ultimately going, where in spirituality you see that the illusory separation between the self and the world has to kind of dissolve and come together, then this is the first step in that direction, to really integrate the body back into what you perceive as yourself. And then finally the third step is to transcend the self. When you have set this foundation, you are ready to embark on the really deep stuff where you are having mystical insights into the nature of reality, where you really meditate and research deeply what it means to be the awareness of everything that has an illusory self and has identified with that self, and then you are ready to see that as well and transcend it. While I was reading the book, I had some deep insights, and it can trigger immediate awakening experiences. So if you are looking for that, this book is also very good to read. It's not very thick. It's printed kind of small and fine, so it takes some time to read, but it's not difficult to read. So it's, I think, a very good entry into spirituality. And then the last thing I liked about this book, or maybe not the last, but one of the last things I want to mention about this book, is it has very good references at the end of the chapters, because then you can read further. You can study the things that he mentioned in detail. And not many books today do that anymore. When they mention some theory or something or some thought, many people want to sell it as their own ideas, but you can see that Ken Wilber really studied a lot of material in order to write this book, and he mentions it, everything. He really gives credit to all the different sources. And so that's really, really good. If you are a starter in spirituality, you will you can dig very deep if you follow all the resources he mentions. Yeah, that's my recommendation for today. Ken Wilber, if you research him as an author, he has many, many great books. I have 2 more of him on my shelf, which I am going to read. And this was the first one I read. It's a really good recommendation. Maybe you will hear me recommending the other 2 books in the future. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.